Sacrifice and the law of entropy. If we do not work on our thoughts, our feelings, the I, the myself, or oneself, the phenomenon of entropy becomes more accentuated within us. Then thoughts tend to become increasingly inferior, negative emotions grow more and more negative, and our volitions weaken. The areas of the brain become debilitated and no longer function as they once did. This is known by the best doctors. Even the greatest scientists fall into entropy. Everything tends toward involution due to the effects of the law of entropy. In the final analysis, this law equalizes everything. The law of entropy can be easily observed. If we place a container of hot water beside one of cold water, we will see how entropy manifests itself. There is an interchange of heat and cold until entropy triumphs and both containers are equalized. For example, at this moment, millions of people are walking along the path of entropy. Because they do not work on themselves, each day they become more stupid. Their minds become atrophied, the centers of the human machine degenerate more and more, and the areas of the brain cease to function. In this way, the day will come when everyone will be equalized in Tartarus by the action of the law of entropy. Have you noticed how the law of entropy equalizes people? One person may be buried in a golden coffin and another in a wooden one. However, no matter how beautiful the sepulcher may be, in the end, both are the same, each reduced to bones. Obviously, death equalizes everyone. Therefore, the humanoids who inhabit the face of the earth, that is, the three-brained or three-centered bipeds, will one day be similar, degenerated and incapacitated. They will become so alike that there will be almost no differences among them. Let us observe the earth. It is said that each day it travels more slowly. That is, the rotation of its axis is becoming slower due to high tides and the effects of the waters. On the other hand, it is said that the sun is cooling down. Perhaps this is happening. However, I say that as the Earth's atmosphere becomes thinner and thinner, it will lose its capacity to analyze and decompose the rays of the sun into light and heat. At this rate, the moon will distance itself from the Earth. This is the general opinion, and I agree. That is entropy. One day, the Earth will become another moon. Entropy will have equalized it. Let us observe how everything functions under the effects of the law of entropy. The oceans have already been transformed into garbage containers, fish are dying, rivers are contaminated, the atmosphere is polluted by smog, and fruits are adulterated. The wise men, the pseudo-know-it-alls, are finishing off the true fruits of the earth. Today, one scarcely finds apples and must eat Chinese apples or oranges from California without seeds. Have you ever seen anything more absurd? Of course, that is the law of entropy. The know-it-alls, satisfied with their wisdom, do not realize that what they have done is degenerate vegetables, forcing them to walk along the path of entropy. At this pace, the land will become increasingly sterile. Atomic explosions have already abused it, and if this continues, one day the Earth will be equalized and become another moon. Fortunately, wisdom, that is, the Taumart Malos, has everything perfectly calculated. We already know that through transformation it is possible to defeat the law of entropy, and obviously transformation includes sacrifice. For example, if one sacrifices sexual desire, that force gives rise to something else. The existential superior bodies of the being crystallize within the being. If one sacrifices anger, the precious stone of meekness appears. If one sacrifices the desire for money, unbearable greed, altruism is born. If one sacrifices envy, philanthropy appears, the yearning to work for the good of others, happiness for the happiness of others. Transformation cannot exist without sacrifice. For instance, diesel fuel in a locomotive must be sacrificed. For what purpose? In order to generate the energy that moves the train. That is sacrifice. If the machine operates on coal, as the old ones did, that combustible is sacrificed. For what purpose? To obtain energy and movement. Yes, when an inferior force is sacrificed to obtain a superior one, transformation occurs. Let us observe this example. Coal is something very different from the energy that moves a locomotive. When it is sacrificed, it becomes something entirely different because the resulting energy is not the coal itself. In the same way, when a man sacrifices his sexual impulses, the result of that energy is the existential superior bodies of the being. Do you see how different the result is? Therefore, if during copulation the sperm is sacrificed, the liberated energy gives origin to the profound inner man. In this way, one can escape from that horrible and degenerative law of entropy. At this moment, the earth walks according to the law of entropy, and if a great sacrifice does not occur, tomorrow it will be equalized and transformed into another moon. However, since the program has not yet ended, each planet must produce 7 races before becoming a moon. A great sacrifice is necessary. A catastrophe is required, and the sacrificer will be the Telmark Malos. Why is a catastrophe necessary? In order to transform the earth, it is necessary to sacrifice this humanity. Everything must be transformed and sacrificed. A transformation is required, and as a result of that transformation of energies, a new earth will emerge with its beauty and a golden age. The catastrophe is indispensable in order to defeat the law of entropy. If the catastrophe did not exist, the law of entropy would end by equalizing the earth with the moon. It would become another moon before its appointed time. However, thanks to the transformation that will be produced through sacrifice, through catastrophe, a new golden age and a new humanity will arise. The earth is dying. Entropy is slowly taking the earth toward its end, and this can be seen by anyone with a bit of vision. Only through transformation will it be possible to prevent the earth from becoming a moon prematurely, to extract something new from chaos. Yes, the transformation that will come will be based on sacrifice and will culminate in a great catastrophe. Even Christ sacrificed himself in the Holy Land in order to defeat the law of entropy. A knife was plunged into the back of a bull. Above the animal was placed the figure of the god Mithras. From the spilled blood of the sacred bull were born the plants and all things. This indicates the same principle. Sacrifice is indispensable in order to achieve transformation, and transformation is urgently necessary in order to overcome entropy. If one does nothing, if one does not sacrifice oneself in order to reduce the eyes to dust, one will be swallowed by entropy. People do not want to sacrifice themselves. Of course, they do not comprehend the law of sacrifice. People believe that the earth can be transformed without sacrifice, and this is absurd. If someone wishes to carry out a work but does not sacrifice himself, sooner or later entropy will arrive and the work will fail. However, if one begins a work with sacrifice as its foundation, incessant transformations will occur and the work will grow and become abundant. One must begin by sacrificing at least one's own sufferings. I assure you that people would sacrifice their pleasures, their vices, even their money, but never their sufferings. People love their sufferings and their pains deeply. They would sacrifice everything except their sufferings. If one begins by sacrificing sufferings, it becomes possible to take a step forward and to defeat the law of entropy. Who among you wishes to sacrifice your own sufferings for something superior? As for myself, I never focused on sufferings. I sacrificed all the things that people love. People love to speak about their experiences, about the sufferings they endured, about the bitterness, what I am now thanks to so many sufferings. In truth, those who wish to sacrifice their sufferings are rare, very few. Observe people and you will see that they are not practical. Observe their psychology and you will see how they love their sufferings, how they enjoy remembering them. When I passed through those situations, when I used to sell newspapers in the streets in order to become what I am now, the doctor, the powerful man, I who once sold newspapers and slept in the streets. People are like that. They love themselves and their pains intensely. People need their sufferings and even enjoy them. The richer, more powerful, and happier they become, the more they occasionally remember their failures and sufferings and feel self-important while recalling them. Eliminate these elements from your personality because everything is transformed through sacrifice. Sacrifice your sufferings. Eliminate from yourselves the eyes that produce suffering, and suffering itself will be sacrificed. The eyes of suffering must be disintegrated, pulverized, and the energy released will produce a transformation from which a different man will be born, a man who defeats the law of entropy. There we have the moon. Whoever dares to die can investigate internally what is occurring within the entrails of our satellite. There one will see the residues of millions of selenite eyes that belonged to the lunar humanity when that satellite was inhabited. Yes, it was once inhabited, long before the existence of the Earth. The moon is very ancient. When it had life, it had a humanity, and today the residues of the selenite eyes are found in the lunar infernal worlds, all completely equalized. Who equalized them? The law of entropy, just as it equalizes two corpses, regardless of whether one is buried in a golden coffin or a wooden one. The law of entropy is the law that equalizes rich and poor. Therefore, nothing changes if one does not transform something. If one does not sacrifice something, one is swallowed by the law of entropy. It is worthwhile to reflect deeply on all of this. Master, does a superior law overcome an inferior law? At another time we might have affirmed this, but now we are addressing it directly. We can say, and I want you to write this in quotation marks, that when an inferior law is transcended by a superior law, the superior law overcomes the inferior law. In order for an inferior law to be transcended by a superior law, it is necessary to sacrifice the inferior law through the superior law. When it is sacrificed, transformation occurs, and the inferior law is transformed into a superior one. Venerable Master, 2 more races are necessary, the 6th and the 7th. Is there a superior law that will originate the sacrifices so that in this way the law of entropy will be overcome? In the last instance, entropy only produces disorder, like what we observe in the atoms of a decomposed cadaver. For example, if a library is not cleaned or organized, the books will pile up one over the other, eventually forming a chaotic mess that no one can understand. This is disorder. However, in a transformation, everything is different. Transformation generates order, even atomic order. In every universe, there is an ordering force, which is why we find order in every molecule of the universe, in the petals of a flower, and in the protons and electrons of an atom. Clearly, if there is order in an atom, there must exist an ordering force. I could not imagine order in a molecule of copper or starch without such a force. When I speak of the ordering force, I mean there must exist an intelligent force. I could never accept an ordering force arising from chance. Chance is not intelligent. Now, if chance were capable of producing an ordering force, then that chance would no longer be chance. It would be an intelligent principle. Using exact logic, we can say that the ordaining directive principle that has always been and will be is the creative demiurge. Only that marvelous ordaining force which puts the universe into activity can generate extraordinary transformations. However, if one does not use that ordering force, the law of entropy gradually produces the disorder of atoms, the disorder of the mind, and the disorder of psychological principles. In this way, all of us would ultimately be equalized, transformed into something of no significance. That is the crude reality of the facts. Inferential peace. Samael Aun Weor.